Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the MMA Hipster podcast, where I'll be recapping all of the action that occurred during the latest UFC fight night. And this was UFC on ESPN, which I believe is the second event they hosted on ESPN. And these ESPN cards have been quite good, exceeding all expectations, especially this one. We've got a couple of really good fights coming up, so I'm very excited to share this one with you guys. Maybe I'll try something different today. Maybe I'll try to recap the fights from the top to the bottom. So we'll do the main event first, and then I'll try to cover one fight in the prelims. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Cain Velasquez versus Francis Ngannou. Now this one, this didn't last very long, did it? This was supposed to be the highly touted return of Cain Velasquez, whose last fight was, I think it was 2016. July 2016 against Travis Browne. And Cain looked fairly good in that fight. 3-year layoff, coming back into the octagon against a monster like Francis Ngannou, which is not an easy task at all. And Francis Ngannou, having just dispatched Curtis Blaydes November of last year in about 45 seconds, looked fairly decent himself. Like none of the trigger shy Francis Ngannou we saw against Derrick Lewis, which that was a fight to forget. Now, the questions coming in before this fight was always about how Cain's body is going to hold up. Will there be ring rust? And on Ngannou's side is how is Ngannou going to deal with the wrestling and the pressure of Cain Velasquez? How is he going to deal with the fence pressure? And also, what will Francis Ngannou do if Cain Velasquez fights the same fight he has fought against JDS? Rather, the same way he has fought against JDS. And obviously, the first question was answered because Cain's leg fucked up. It caved underneath himself as Francis was throwing an uppercut. So that's really unfortunate. And it happened inside the first round, which really stopped us from seeing what Cain Velasquez could actually do in this fight. But before his leg fucked up, he was throwing a lot of high kicks to the head of Francis Ngannou, and that was to keep Francis Ngannou's right hand close to his head to form a guard for the high kick, which stopped Francis Ngannou from using his favorite uppercut. And if you think about it, if your right hand is forming a guard to guard the high kick, you won't be able to drop down low for the looping uppercut that Francis Ngannou is so well known for. And that same uppercut Alistair Overeem ate, where his head flew off his neck. But the drawback with high kicks, especially on the retreat, like what Cain was doing, is that you're basically caught on one foot and can't circle off the fence, as well as if you have both feet underneath you, because one foot is up, kicking your opponent. And that created the opportunity for Francis Ngannou to engage Cain along the fence, hitting him with a 1-2, I think it was a 1-slap-2, as he is slapped down on Cain's neck as Cain tried to level change, which was the correct thing to do. And then Francis caught him with a very tight and very short uppercut. I'm not sure if that did too much damage. It was quite simultaneous, where the uppercut connected and Cain's knee blew out. And that's basically the fight. Very quick one, a very unfortunate one, and well-deserved win for Francis Ngannou. But a very sad ending to Cain Velasquez. And at this point, we've got to ask ourselves: have we seen the best of Cain Velasquez? And did he spend the prime of his career being injured? As he is 36 years old, and in reality, you only have about another 4 years until he's past his fighting prime, and that's been very generous. But we'll find out again when Cain fights in probably another 3 years. Anyways, let's push on. Paul Felder versus James Vick. This was a good fight. Really enjoyed this one. Lots of tactical adjustments made by both men. I'll get into that in a minute. First, James Vick is coming off that massive knockout against Justin Gaethje, where he was on the receiving end of that knockout. Gaethje took it to him, caught him with an overhand right along the fence. And Paul Felder coming off that split decision loss, really tough loss against Mike Perry. And that was at welterweight on, I think that was on a very short notice as well. So Felder being one of the most beloved fighters out there, up against James Vick, who is one of the most hated fighter, I'd say, just because of his ties with his coach Lloyd Irvin, who is, got several allegations against him, and he also tends to get on fighters' nerves on Twitter. So no secret who people are going for in this fight. So what did we know before coming into this fight? James Vick, obviously the longer guy, he likes to pull his opponents and then counter. But he also tends to leave his chin out and his head staying on the line as he throws his strikes, purely relying on his reach and the lean back in order to counter his opponents, which also gave rise to one of his bad habits, which is when he's getting pressured by fighters such as Justin Gaethje, Vick would try to land the pull counter. He'll back on a straight line and eventually hit the fence, and that's how Gaethje landed that overhand right. But yes, you could see Paul Felder trying to take advantage of this. He looked to land the overhand right, but James Vick looked to, he looked to make some adjustments after his last fight with Gaethje. So he looked to circle away from the power hand of Paul Felder constantly throughout this fight, and he was very mindful of his back along the fence. Paul Felder saw that he had trouble to keep Vick along the fence, and he adjusted to use calf kicks, essentially kicking the trailing leg as James Vick moved along the fence. And Felder will set this up by feinting up top. Basically, the feints would make James Vick move in one direction, and Paul Felder would kick the trailing leg as Vick was moving. Not sure if you guys noticed, but as the fight went on, Vick actually adjusted to the overhand right of Paul Felder by using a lot of uppercuts and step-up knees down the middle, as well as using a lot of straights to take control of the center line, using his range and occupying the space in which Felder's straight punches will be coming from. And because that overhand right requires Paul Felder to be hunched over, those knees and uppercuts worked really well. But again, more adjustments were made on Felder's part. He will actually counter those step-up knees with he was looking for spinning back elbows, spinning back fists, and for the straights of James Vick, Felder looked to slip and rip to the body and to the head with left hooks. So yeah, really good fight. We got to see many adjustments made by both fighters, and Paul Felder took it with a unanimous decision. Congratulations to Paul Felder. Moving on. Cortney Casey versus Cynthia Calvillo. Now, Cortney Casey was the taller fighter in this fight. Calvillo looked to stay on the outside. She did a lot of feinting before coming in, feinting a lot of level changes, overhand setups, inside leg kicks. But so basically, the thing with a shorter fighter in trying to negate the range of a longer fighter, there's two ways to do it. First way is to slip your opponent's punches and step in and work your combinations from the inside. And the second way being make your opponent come to you. So that's basic. That's what Cynthia Calvillo was doing to Cortney Casey. Calvillo would dance on the outside, making Cortney Casey come towards her and stepping in whenever Casey was throwing a strike. And doing this effectively negating the range advantage of Casey. And yeah, that's basically the story of this fight. Casey was quite static and was not very effective in cage cutting, so Calvillo took the win. Kron Gracie versus Alex Caceres. Now this was the one that got everyone's interest. Kron Gracie, obviously from a proud Gracie lineage. He is the son of Rickson Gracie and the grandson of the great Helio Gracie. And the way he won this fight against Alex Caceres was, you could say, very Gracie-like, choking out Alex Caceres inside the first round. How he got to that point was very, very interesting. To initiate the takedown, Kron used a front teep to the leg of Caceres and ducking under as Caceres came back with the left, securing a body lock. Then Kron drove Caceres to the fence, switching the grip from double underhooks to under over, because that hand over is essentially the choking arm. And the next parts are going to be very hard to explain without pictures, so I'll try my best. So yeah, Kron sinks a standing hook with his right leg inside the right leg of Caceres. And with that same right leg, he weaved his foot onto the left thigh of Caceres. Kron then leaned heavy, making Caceres taking all of his weight, and they fall to the mat. And once they hit the mat, it was Kron's world. Caceres fights the hands for a little while. Something Kron showed was very, very interesting. In getting the choking arm under Caceres' neck, Kron actually grabbed his own glove to pull the choking arm in under the neck of Caceres. And that was it. Great win for Kron. And that is exactly the type of fight that... oh shit, wait, he's 30. So not really a kid anymore, hey? But still very, very highly marketable, especially if you bring Nate Diaz with you when you walk out and have him in your corner. Yeah, 100% definitely interested in his next fight. But for now, let's move on. Vicente Luque versus Bryan Barberena. Now this was a treat for the fans. You know, as much as I love a technical brawl, I also love a blood and guts war, and that's what this fight was. Bryan Barberena, you remember him from either having a dad bod or defeating Sage Northcutt. And Vicente Luque, he's one of those up-and-comers, very, very dangerous right hand, and also he's coming off he's won 7 out of his last 8 coming into this fight. Lesson learned from this fight is that never to judge a book by its cover. Because Bryan Barberena, whilst having an amazing dad bod, is also such a tough person. Luque hit him with so many right straights down the middle, and these will be shots that landed flush on the chin, on the temple, and Bryan Barberena did not give a fuck. He kept moving forward, landing his shots in between. Actually, he switched to the Diaz boxing mode, which is where throwing in punches with 70% of the power and just pat into the opponent's guard. And he really took advantage of the fact that Luque was just covering up and moving forward as a defense instead of using mobile footwork. He got inside and made it a dirty fight for Luque, and really dirty boxed him up, grabbing the back of Luque's head, finishing his combinations, and the shoulder bumps Luque out of his stunts. And all the while Luque adjusted as well, using elbows a lot more, and digging to the body as Barberena had a really, really hard head. And towards the very end of this fight, Luque cranked up the power, lands the right hand, and followed up by 2 knees in the tie clinch, which dropped Barberena and finished the fight with 6 seconds remaining on the clock. And that was such a fitting end to that fight. What a treat for the fans. And I think at the end of the fight, they said this was the most significant strikes landed in UFC welterweight history, which tells you exactly how much damage each fighter took in that fight. So yeah, very well deserved fight of the night, and they both take home 50k. We are running out of time, so I'll quickly go through the next two fights. Myles versus Andre Fili. Jury coming off a loss to Chad Mendes, and Andre Fili coming off a loss to Michael Johnson. But they're both still very relevant fighters, both fighters inside top 20. And yeah, this fight was predominantly dominated by the jab of Andre Fili. And what I felt like was Myles Jury didn't show enough urgency. He didn't show enough counters to the jab, besides some spinning back fists attempts, which caught Fili off guard once. But he needed to put in some more, perhaps some more low kicks, basically taking out the leg that Fili would be putting weight on as he goes for the jab. And perhaps he could have also used a little more right hands, taking his head offline for the jab of Fili, and also throw his right hand over the top. So Fili took that one by unanimous decision. Right, on to the last one. Jimmie Rivera versus Aljamain Sterling. Now this was a high-ranked bantamweight matchup. Both guys putting together wins after their loss to Magic Marlon Moraes. But this was a tough night in the office for Jimmie Rivera. I feel like Rivera was a little frustrated in this one, purely because stylistically this was a tough matchup for him. Sterling is very, very good on the ground, and he's got a really long reach for the division. And Jimmie Rivera, being the shorter fighter with shorter reach, really relies on intercepting counters, basically stepping in to strike when his opponent strikes, and trying to time them to negate that range disadvantage. So this fight was fought in an open stance engagement, which is Southpaw versus Orthodox. And Sterling stayed on the outside, stayed very rangy, threw a lot of kicks, and if the kick misses, followed by straight by hands, throwing together feints in between that, throwing off the timing of Rivera's counters. And Rivera, being kept on the outside, didn't know when to step in for the counter or when to step back. And Sterling mixed this up beautifully with his level changes for the single leg. Since it is a Southpaw versus Orthodox engagement, the front leg would always be there for the taking. He never got into that exchange range with Rivera, basically controlling the range that's favorable to him. So he took that fight via unanimous decision. Very impressive performance, especially against a guy like Jimmie Rivera. This fight will probably project him into the top 5 with plenty of interesting matchups to come. You've got Marlon Moraes, I think he's fighting for the title next. Cody Garbrandt, Dominic Cruz, Rafael Assunção, and I think that's it. He'll probably replace Jimmie Rivera as number 5. And that, ladies and gentlemen, concludes this week's recaps. Apologies for the late upload. I promise I'll up to speed on these things. Anyways, thank you for tuning in. I'll be probably uploading some videos for UFC 235. That's a big card, so look out for those. In the meantime, check out some videos on my channel. Not gonna lie, they're pretty good. So yeah, a little bit of a shameless self-promotion there. Anyhow, like, share, and subscribe. Follow me on Instagram at MMA Degree. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Cheers.